Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining today's In Conversation Live from the ICA here on LinkedIn. My name's Ros Dixon-Bennett, and I am the ICA's Global Lead for Governance, Risk and Compliance. I'm pleased to be joined today by leadership expert Claire Elaine Arthurs-Payne to talk about the human element of resilience beyond technology and systems and controls. Claire, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Brilliant. It's great to be here.
Fantastic. So the session is set for 30 minutes. So we'll take the first 20 minutes or so for our discussion, and then we'll open up for some questions that our attendees can submit to us in the comments of the event. So, Claire, let's get straight to it. Last week, the UK's Health and Safety Executive published its annual stats showing that in the last 12 months, there have been 1.7 million people recorded as having a work-related illness at a cost to businesses of £21.6 billion. Of those 1.7 million people, 46% have reported work-related stress, depression, or anxiety. Based on your experience, do you consider that these figures are representative? Are you surprised by them?
I don't think I'm surprised by them at all. They're a trend that's been carrying on for quite a number of years now. I think, though, really, they're only the tip of the iceberg, because what we've got to remember is that 46% figure there is just of people that have been reported that have actually been signed off with stress and anxiety. The actual experience of that is going to be significantly higher. In fact, to the point, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone in the current operating environment who wouldn't say that they are finding things more strenuous than they used to be and definitely being expected to do more with less. And I think people have been hanging on, expecting that things are going to change since the pandemic, that we were all going to get back to this mythical business as usual. But actually, I think we're at the stage now where everybody is starting to realise that this is business as usual, and this rate of change and this increase in pressure and this requirement to do more with less is going to be the norm going forwards.
Absolutely, yes, yeah. Now, when we read what's happening out there in the evolution of business, it's hard to get away from technology. So is this technological evolution, is that actually helping with alleviating some of this stress?
I think technology is a double-edged sword, really, because technology can absolutely help with refining processes. It can help with streamlining things. It can help us to do things faster. I think, though, the problem comes when people think technology is going to solve the problems. And there's two reasons for that. One is technology follows. So if you're at the front end, particularly when you're working in areas like compliance, you are going to be at the front end of change coming in. The tools that technology then comes in to help with are things that you find you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis that it can then help speed up. So it doesn't set in front of you for you to be able to actually deal with that rate of change any faster. I think the other thing about technology as well is that you can put in as many new systems as you want to do. If you don't factor in the human side of what's happening in your business, the technology isn't going to help you, because either it's not going to be the right thing because it's not addressing the right issues, or it's just simply not going to be adopted. So technology is great when it's used right, but it's not the thing that solves the problems.
Okay, so how do we use technology right? How can we use it to address the challenges that we see?
So the key thing is to understand what's actually going on. So you're going to be looking, obviously, at how what's coming over the horizon. You're going to be looking at what's coming into the business. You're obviously going to be thinking then, is there anything that we can do with our processes, with our technology that's going to help manage that? But the key thing is to really be talking to the front end users, to the people that you are asking to engage with this technology, to say, what is it that's actually going to help you? What are the bits that are taking you a long time? What are the pieces that are causing you frustration? And if we solve it in this way, is that something that's going to help, or is that just going to add another layer of complexity, another form you've got to fill in, another thing you've got to remember, which actually is going to add to the stress rather than reducing what it is they've got to deal with? So it's all about communication, and it's about having those conversations and not just relying on the data and the facts and the figures, but actually having those soft conversations with people in and around the business to say, what's going on and what is it you actually need. And if you get that right, you'll get the technology in there that's going to help the processes, not hinder them.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. Now, compliance, and I'm sure a lot of our people who are watching at the moment would probably agree that those of us involved in compliance, certainly those of us who've been in it for a number of years, anybody at a senior level has a certain level of resilience anyway, because we're not necessarily everybody's best friend when we turn up in their business area. We do sometimes have to deliver some difficult messages. So, are we facing a different approach perhaps to support our compliance colleagues, or how do you see how do you see that fitting in with the wider business?
I think there's absolutely no doubt that definitely being in compliance, because of the rate of change and the rate of integration that you've got to do, you probably are at the forefront, I would expect, in most organizations of having that resilience and being able to cope with that constant level of change. Um, I think though the speed of that change, it's ramping up.
Mm,
There was some research done at the beginning of this century back in 2001 that said, in the next 100 years, we're going to see the equivalent of about 20,000 years worth of progress because we're not seeing one thing lead to another anymore. We're seeing one thing lead to the development of 100 other things and 100 other things and 100 other things. And because of that, everybody is constantly trying to chase to catch up. You can't stay one step ahead. So it does
mm,
mean that you're constantly going to have this firing coming in your environment. And because that's coming in, you've obviously got to deal with that on your desk, but you're also then dealing with people in the organization who are having to get used to dealing with that rate of change in their environment as well, and they perhaps are less prepared for it. So it does make things very, very difficult because it does mean that there is a different type of resilience that's needed. It's not about having a thicker skin or being able to, have a positive attitude or chin up. It's not that kind of resilience that's needed. It's actually looking at what is something that's going to be sustainable whilst we all keep weathering the storm because it's not going to calm down. And I think that's where the real change is coming in and making it more difficult for people to deal with.
mm. Yes, yeah, definitely. And I think you've got the nail on the head there. It's a different sort of resilience, absolutely. Now, obviously, I mentioned the health and safety numbers at the beginning, and that talked about the number of people who are essentially signed off or not able to work. What I think we're looking at there is we're not saying that everybody who is struggling is signed off, and everybody who's actually in the work environment is absolutely perfect and isn't impacted at all. So what about those in the middle who are kind of maybe struggling, maybe feeling impacted by this rate of change? What's going on there, and what do you think we need to be aware of?
There will certainly be a few things going on there. One of the things that happens when people get put under stress and they're being asked to do more with less is their decision-making capabilities shift.
Mm,
So people's attitude towards risk, for example, changes, and they do one of two things. They either become much more gung-ho because they just need to get things done, at which point you've got your corners being cut, you've got procedures that are not being followed, records not being kept, and that can lead to problems down the line. At the opposite end of the spectrum, you get the people who go into freeze, which is another perfectly understandable reaction where procrastination has taken over. They just are in overwhelm and actually they're just not doing any of what they should be doing. And seeing those as the tip of the iceberg, it's quite difficult to manage. But I think one of the things that we have done in the past, and understandably so, is we've seen an area where there's been a lack of compliance or where people are not performing to the level we expect them to. And what we've done is we've gone in and gone, right, so either we need to get the policy and the procedure updated because it's not working, or maybe we need some new technology, or maybe we need to look at this as performance management, where we start beating people with a stick because they're not doing what they should be doing. What gets completely missed there is the human element of it, which is the process and policy may be perfectly fit for service, as might the technology might be doing what you want it to do. But if your people are stuck in absolute overwhelm, you can hit them with a stick as much as you want. All you're actually going to do is increase the pressure on them. So you're going to get more of these two types of behaviors coming up in the organization. So what you need to have a look at is you need to have a look at what's actually going on with the people and where the pressure's coming from. Now, there's very little that you can do in the outside environment to alleviate the pressure and the rate of change. What you can do, though, is you can make changes within your own internal environment and look at the culture you've got to make sure that people have got an environment that serves them, that means that they've got a safe space where they can actually ask for help when they need it, where if they see something going wrong, they're not worried about putting their head above the parapet and saying, I think we've got an issue coming in here, or actually, I'm just really struggling to get this done. You need that kind of open environment where they can bring that to a table, so that you can nip things in the bud before you get 6 months down the line and it starts showing up in the figures that are making their way up through the systems.
Yeah. And so I guess there's a number of firms out there, I would say, who, well, we've already got a good compliance culture.
Mm.
People are happy to report their breaches or what have you. How is what you're suggesting different from that? And if it is, how do we go about establishing that type of culture?
I think the thing is that people, there are levels of being happy to report.
Mm,
I
mhm,
think it's whether you've got a culture where people genuinely know how others in their team are doing. What's going on at home? Have they had enough sleep? Are they actually able to look after their well-being? Have they had a break today? Have they actually managed to be able to step away from their desk for 5 minutes to reset? Because actually, otherwise, they're operating in that area where they are going to be psychologically really drained and finding it difficult to make the right decisions. So it's looking at it much more, and I think the word is overused, but from a well-being perspective. And I think well-being as this idea in organizations has almost got a little bit too fluffy. It's not about having somebody come in to do yoga in the office once a week or being able to, I don't know, have an app that says how you're feeling today. All those things might help to an extent, but actually that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is genuine human connection within teams and an awareness at a human level of how are people doing, and if they really are looking like they're struggling, what mechanisms and what can we put in around them that's going to help them to be in the peak position that we want them to be in, because we want them to be able to bring their best into the office and we want them making the best possible decisions. And that's not just towing the line and going, oh, crikey, I've got no choice but to report this. That's actually going, I can see a problem coming because I'm open to scanning the horizon. It's being able to say, I think this is going to be a pressure point where we're going to struggle to do this. What do we need to put back? How do we need to reprioritize? So it's giving them that ability to be proactive in what they're doing, not just sitting there being reactive and just about getting by, because that's what a lot of people are doing these days.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's interesting. I noticed, and I'm going to be slightly provocative here, so I do apologize in advance. Um, you talked there about the importance of human connection. Does that mean we all need to go back in the office full time?
I don't think actually it's about being back in the office full time. I think it's about the quality of the connection that you've got. There is again a lot of people that think that, having like a group meeting once a week, whether you do it in person or on Zoom, is not necessarily going to give you that level of connection.
Hmm.
What is going to give you that quality of connection is having a genuine interest in the people around you. It's, remember, it's saying, how was your weekend? Oh, what have you been up to? Knowing that they do, I don't know, a certain sport after work and asking how they're getting on with it. Because if they then say to you, actually, I've not had time to go for the last 3 weeks and I'm feeling it, you then know that there's something going on there. It's having those bits of conversations and information, being genuinely interested in the other person, not just trying to get through an agenda on a meeting. And it's not just putting in FaceTime for the sake of FaceTime. It's thinking, actually, it could be just 5 minutes to genuinely connect. And in those little tiny conversations, as a manager or as a compliance officer who is going out into the organization to talk to other people that you need to deal with on a regular basis, you will pick up some real golden nuggets of information about how things are really going.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, yeah, just to kind of support what you're saying, because I completely agree. I think it's asking about those elements and then listening to what the answer is and being able to respond in that place.
and
Okay.
hearing what's there in between. And I think this is again one of those things. Some people go on courses and they get told to ask these questions, and it's almost like they've got themselves another tick list.
Mm.
It's the genuine interest behind it, and if you've got that genuine interest, what you'll find is you're hearing to you're listening to actually hear what's being said and what's not being said, not just to say I've ticked the box or I need to respond. What you actually want to do is go, what am I, what's all the information I'm picking up here from this interaction?
Absolutely, absolutely. And really what we're trained for, which is to identify the risk. That's really what you're listening out for, isn't it? From an individual personal level. Okay.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. So there's a lot of firms that will have existing well-being policies and such like. How important is it, do you think, that um, leaders are seen to be um, walking the talk, as it were? And I don't mean, bursting into tears in the middle of a board meeting, because that's not, we're crossing the line there, I think. But at the same time, to what extent do you think that it's important that our senior leaders are modeling these behaviors as well as talking about them?
Absolutely vital. It's absolutely vital. Um, and I think again, it's one of these things where there is the policy side which gets it on the agenda and means that it is, puts it as a priority for the organization. But unless you're actually living into the principles behind that policy, then nothing is gonna bed into the culture itself. And if people see their boss, in the office, stressed, long hours, not taking time for themselves, not eating properly, not having, and not dealing with things themselves, they feel like they don't have permission to do it. There's an expectation that comes down, and actually it filters from the top down. Whereas actually, if you start modeling that ability to look after yourself, to manage your energy, and to make sure that you are being as efficient as you possibly can be, that culture actually, like ripples in a pond, comes out from the leadership team and will come because it's permissive down through the organization. And it's not about saying, I've got tons to do. I need to stay at my desk today, feeling it's counterintuitive to step away for 10 minutes. It's actually changing that culture to say, I am managing myself so that I am as effective as I can possibly be. Because if you're doing that, actually you'll find you're not procrastinating, jobs aren't taking as long, decisions are getting made better. It's easier for you to see what the solution is. Actually, the work you're doing speeds up. So you actually get more done despite the fact you're spending less time sitting at a screen, feeling stressed and worrying about what you've got to get done. But it has to come from the top down. And I think with the pressure that people are under, I think they feel like if they step away, it's going to be seen that they're not putting the time in, they're not putting the effort in, they're not taking it seriously enough. Actually, they're doing the best thing possible, which is make sure they can work and bring their optimum selves to work in the best way that they can.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Claire. Um, there's just a couple of minutes left just for our chat. So perhaps just tying this all together then, we've there's some really useful information that you've been able to share here. If well, because I'm sure we're all kind of thinking, oh, we can probably help here. What would you say are the top, maybe three things that we can take away and we can actually take action on from what you've been talking about today?
I would say absolutely top of the list is if you're finding areas where you can see non-compliance trickling through, before you look at changing policies, you look at changing procedures, bringing in new technology, and before you look at doing performance management, get in there and have some conversations. Go and have a coffee with people, get out from behind your desk and go and have a coffee with the people that are actually affected and listen for those little nuggets of information. Because if you can understand the underlying problems and pressures, the solution you're going to find is going to be far more effective. And that probably brings me on to my second point, which is be part of the solution. I think there is this idea sometimes with compliance, which I find really frustrating, that it's almost an us and them, that they're not on the same team. And actually, it couldn't be further from the truth. Compliance at its heart is all about facilitating and making sure that you can get the business forward, you can move projects forward, you can get things done in a way that is going to work, in a way that is going to be compliant, in a way that's not going to trip us up down the line. And I think this is the thing. A lot of people um, are concerned sometimes about saying to compliance, oh, compliance are going to put a roadblock in here. Um, I don't think that's true. I think how do we get this done? Be on the same team. And if you don't know what the answer is because you're thinking, do you know what? I think there is something there we need to think about. Say, I think there are a few things we need to consider. I need to go and think about it. And don't be worried about doing that because you're working on a solution then with people. So that's probably my second point. Then I think the third point would be coming back to the first one, actually, get out from behind your desk. Um, with your team, with the other key people that you deal with in the organization, get out from behind the desk and go and have those conversations. And it can be have a quick coffee, have a quick catch up if you're in the office, or it can be, not had a chat to you for a while. Can we have a 15-minute chat on Zoom? Do you want to have a coffee with me and have a bit of a break and just see what's going on? So make it work for you, but get out from behind the spreadsheets, get out from behind the data and actually start making those communications and feeding in what you're learning into your interpretation of what you're looking at.
Absolutely, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I mean, I like to think that we as a profession, compliance have kind of moved past the policing and the us and them, but there's still always kind of pockets of it, and yeah, that's certainly something that I always pushed with with my team and with my interactions is that we may be three separate lines of defense, but we're all on the same side. We're all on the same team here. We're all in the same company. We're pushing in the same direction. And what we're here in compliance doing is making sure that the business can follow its strategic plan, that it can meet its objectives and do it in a way that the regulator doesn't come knocking on the door. It's so important. So yeah, fostering those relationships, absolutely, it's really key. Thank you, Claire. That's great. I'm just having a look at the questions here. So Robert has sent us a question here and said, how can we ensure that employees are prepared for high stress scenarios that impact operational continuity?
In terms of operational continuity, you will have, I'm sure, policies, procedures, stress testing, all of these things that we're all very familiar with in place. Um, what can we have though that is actually going to help them on a personal level?
Yeah.
Um, we're going to have those relationships in place. It all comes down to the relationships. It's when something happens, do we have the relationship to be able to say, crikey, this is hard. Let's pull together. Let's have a conversation. Let's acknowledge that this is difficult. Let's see what we can do, what we can't do. And I think encouraging them on a day-to-day basis to be looking at where are the pinch points, where can I see it coming, so they can have these conversations and just natural in the office, and also getting them to have a look at rearranging priorities. Because what is a priority in business as usual or day-to-day business, and we've set them all, at the beginning of the quarter, or we've set them in the last team meeting, that could change very rapidly. So get used to having those conversations about what is actually our priority right now. So if something does come in that absolutely sends everything into a flurry where we've really got to start changing things quickly, people aren't uncomfortable with the idea that their priority might change overnight and that they've got permission to go, I know we said we were focusing on this, but actually we're just going to put that down one and we're doing this right now. Um, because there is going to be that ability to change. And the thing about our neurological systems is whenever we get a change, we go through a loop of different emotions around change.
Mhm.
If we're not used to change, we go along that journey a little bit slower. If we're used to doing that change and moving things and being dynamic on a regular basis, it's a little bit like an elastic band. We've got this neuroplasticity within our system, which if you keep stretching it and you learn to do this on a daily basis, and you learn to have that agility in the way that we're working day to day, at the point at which there's a bigger stretch, we catch up with it a lot quicker. We're on board a lot faster. And actually, we're not getting stuck in that position where we're panicking because our neurological system's going, we know what this flex feels like, let's just crack on with it. So you can really do that by getting that into the culture day to day, so that when crisis hits, it's not going to send anybody over the edge.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, no, I completely understand that. And it's about establishing those boundaries, isn't it? In terms of, this is how far you can stretch it. And actually, um, I guess in that culture of trust and openness, whatever you need to stretch it within, as a leader, as a manager, whatever, actually, I'm going to empower you to decide that. Anything outside of that, we need to be really clear about what the escalation route is and what I'm going to do about it. But actually within that, and so everybody knows at what's in their control and then what actually they have to ask for help with or reprioritize or whatever. So absolutely. Yes, I think
Yes,
yeah,
bringing
I
that
think practice.
flexibility, bringing in that agility and that flexibility into day-to-day work is really important. Sometimes as well, you can create a space which is almost like a sandbox where you go, I know we think we know we're doing things the best way, but how about we just play around with this? What would happen if we changed how we were doing that? Where's that going to affect things? Having games in a sandbox environment like that will still do that neuroplasticity work with the team. And also sometimes it can come out with better ways of doing things as well.
Fantastic. Thank you. Hassan has provided us with another question. He's asked for some insights around how you can handle anxiety when you're moving perhaps between departments or you've perhaps you might be moving to a role that's is going to be more demanding. How can you handle that kind of change, even though it's self-induced, as it were?
Yeah, so I think there's two sides to that. There is a definite rule that if you've got as a manager, if you've got someone coming into your team, the first thing you've got to do is line up that connection. The first thing that we do as humans is we ask, am I safe? Can I rely on you? We
Hmm.
want to know that we've got a safe pair of hands that we're reporting into. We want to know we've got some psychological safety there in the team. If we haven't got that, it takes 100 times longer for anyone to find their feet and to get running with it.
Hmm.
If you're finding you're not getting that lead from the manager or from the team that you're coming into, first thing I would always say is start building your relationships. I mean, you will know that that shift is coming. Go and ask for a coffee with some of your colleagues. Go and say, if you've got somebody who's moving out of your role as well, go and have a coffee with them. Get the lowdown on what are the bits that are going to be difficult here. What are the things I need to look out for? Is there anything that you've not had time to tie up that you think I should be keeping an eye on? That will put you into a bedrock to come in. And then if you've made contact and those connections and those relationships have started in a really positive way with other members of the team and with the person you're going to be reporting into now, you're already bedding in your own safety, which is going to allow your system to go, I'm safe and I'm in control here, and you know who you can speak to. You know, actually, that person's quite receptive to giving me help. That person's really good to ask about that. You've got that feeling already before you even sit down at your desk on day one. It's going to help you have a much better start to be in there. And it's going to help you as well if you are going in somewhere where you're going to need that resilience to be able to have those conversations with people from day one as well and get that agility in there. And it's really interesting if you have someone that comes into a team that does that as well, because these kinds of positive connections and these conversations, they are like ripples in a pond. Somebody sees one person doing it and going, actually, that's worked really well. You start seeing it show up and it can move out throughout the team and throughout the organization as well. It's really interesting.
Fantastic. Thank you. Yes, I think it is all about establishing that safety, isn't it? In whatever way it is. And I think also just to kind of add to kind of the point is that you're going into a new role, so you're going to get things wrong and it's okay. And that's kind of, that's the choice that's been made. It's the I don't want to sound like I'm kind of being over positive here, but change is can quite often be a good thing as well. You want to challenge yourself, you want to, and it's when that desire to change and to grow, it just becomes a bit too much to manage, doesn't it? And that's I guess where we've been talking about that challenge to
Yeah.
resilience.
And I think there is a massive issue that can come up around that fear of failure. There is a real fear of, I've got to make a good impression. I need to get it all right. Actually, sometimes failing is the best thing you can possibly do, because when you fail, you get better, because there is always learning around failure, and it means that you get better and better and better. So rather than going in going, I'm really concerned and I'm going to stop myself doing anything because I think I might fail at something, sometimes actually go, do you know what? I just don't know what to do with this. I'm stuck. I need to ask for help. Or do you know what? That didn't work the way I thought it would, but I now know why and I know what I can do better next time. So coming in with that, it is a genuine attitude of safe to fail. It's not actually just safe to fail. Sometimes it's good. Sometimes
It's
it is good.
necessary. Yeah, absolutely. Well, our time's up. I mean, it feels like we're only just scratching the surface here, but thank you so much for joining us today, Claire. Um, for ICA members, Claire and I are going to be continuing the conversation, which is going to be recorded, and that will be in our Learning Hub. But for those of us joining today, those of you who joined us today, sorry, on LinkedIn, thank you so much for joining us. And thanks once again, Claire. We really appreciate your time.
It's been brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Claire. Take care.